Hey SEOs and content marketers, say goodbye to crazy spreadsheet mashups and experience unprecedented connectivity between your SEO planning and reporting data. Introducing Audience Key, technology for keyword mapping, content brief automation, and rank tracking that form an SEO strategy system providing unparalleled feedback loops between planning, reporting, and optimization activities. Put your time and energy into strategy, not data upkeep. Visit audiencekey.com and apply for a free trial today. Okay, guys. So we teased this interview last week throughout the show. We have him in studio, Jono Alderson, SEO consultant, WordPress contributor, and digital superstar. So Jono's been around for a long time. He's an award-winning SEO consultant. Jono builds brands' SEO strategies foundationally through technical SEO, performance improvement, and the use of structured data. Jono's won several awards, including the coveted title of SEO World Champion at SEO Oktoberfest, and perhaps more importantly, this year, Jono was named Digital Superstar at the 2024 In Orbit Awards, and that's one of Europe's premier conferences on business and digital growth. Okay, even more importantly, at least for this conversation, Jono Alderson is among the premier contributors to WordPress.org, perhaps the largest and longest-lasting open-source project in internet history. Aside from his time working at Yoast, Jono's visible contribution to history at WordPress.org is several dozens deep, includes numerous SEO-related items such as XML sitemaps, href language tags, how 301s are written, Google Tag Manager usage and associations, paginations, and a lot more. He's one of the people whose work, both professional and voluntary, have contributed to a better environment for all of us to work in. He knows the folks at WordPress.org and the commercial entities, and he has, until recently, had a absolute front row seat watching this this drama unfold. Jono, welcome to Webcology. It's amazing that you're able to spare time with us. I'm going to ask a really open-ended question. What's going on at WordPress?
Oh, sheesh. So also, thank you for the lovely intro before we get into that, because I feel like this is a long and winding rabbit hole that we're going to go down. Yeah, what is going on? I wish I had a good answer. I guess the shortest answer, and then we can unpick that, is that Matt Mullenweg, who is generally referred to as the kind of benevolent dictator for life, who decides what WordPress is and isn't, which is in no small part problematic, which we'll come on to, has made some contentious decisions that have destabilize the boat and upset the community and potentially represent some existential risk for WordPress and maybe even the broader open source movement. Yeah, he's not playing nicely, and the damage is now impacting real people and real companies, and it's only getting worse as we watch. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
WordPress is the foundation or the platform for perhaps up to 60% of websites that are out there right now.
Yeah.
And as an organization or as an entity, it's not necessarily what people think it is. In fact, it's a couple of entities.
Yeah.
How is WordPress structured?
Yeah, and I wish I could answer this question as well, because this is deliberately obtuse. Right. So yeah, it's depending on the numbers you read, it's anywhere between kind of 40 and 60% of the web. So this is enormous. And WordPress the software is open source. So anybody can take it, they can modify it as long as they do so under whichever version of the GPL it's under, and they publish those changes publicly, yada, 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 all the same kind of nice things that we have with stuff like Linux and bits of JavaScript and things. That's the software, but there are also, as you say, other moving parts. So that software is made available from WordPress.org, which is a website which is ostensibly kind of the home of that, but which is owned by Matt Mullenweg and is his property. WordPress, the software, is contributed to by many, many volunteers who are largely uncompensated for that, or a much smaller amount who are maybe employed by large companies who make some money off WordPress. So hosting companies, Google have a team, for example, companies who sell plugins. But alongside that, there's also WordPress.com, which is the home of the kind of official hosted version of WordPress, which is owned and run by Automatic, which is a company that Matt Mullenweg owns. Alongside that, there is also the WordPress Foundation, which is a kind of governance board that is in theory meant to manage the commercial side and money and contributions into the WordPress project, to do charitable activities and to decide broadly how this ecosystem works, of which there are three members, two of which are so silent and absent I don't even know their names, and the third is, no surprise, Matt Mullenweg. And the answer to your question of what is WordPress and what are all these entities, the answer to all of them is they're Matt Mullenweg. And that it's what's become, well, we've all known this for a while, that whilst ostensibly we have an open source community managing an open source product with an open roadmap, all collectively working together for the greater good, quietly behind the scenes, Matt is and has always been in charge. And generally, that's been a kind of accepted problem, that broadly he's got a good vision for the product. Broadly, he resources it very well. He's very generous in certain ways with time and resource and employees and donations and stuff. Broadly, there's a good vision of the future of the web. But occasionally he just seems to misread the room quite phenomenally badly. And he upsets a lot of volunteers who then go on to quit. He confuses and confounds problems. He quite evidently seems to struggle to relate to normal people who have normal amounts of money and normal relationships with the real working world. Yeah, he is way out of touch.
The recent problems that have been happening at WordPress and in that ecosystem that I think a lot of people are familiar with, we're going to get to in a second, but you just suggested that he has a pattern of behavior that goes back in time where he overreacts or reacts poorly to something or another. So this isn't new behavior. This has happened before.
Yeah, and I'll try and pull out some specific examples. I've got a link somewhere that'll find. But yeah, so there's all sorts of interesting tensions, what with it being an open source community and largely volunteer driven, around compensation and money and priorities and the direction of the project. So some of his product decisions have been questionable, like the doubling down on the Gutenberg project a few years ago when there were other existential threats is still contentious. And actually, in hindsight, I think it might have been the right decision, but the way it was presented and landed and essentially forced down people's throats was not good. There's been some weird moments where at times there's been some extreme tension around some very prolific and important contributors essentially being on the poverty line, people who are like holding up half the web with one line of code, not being able to feed their families, when in theory, Automatic or the WordPress Foundation could just say, you know what, here's a nominative salary. And then out of the blue, Matt turns up and has donated $500,000 or whatever it was of his own money to putting some Christmas lights on a bridge in New York or somewhere. And it's just examples where he's very, very divorced from the challenges that the people, the often unpaid people on the ground who are powering his ecosystem face. And then there's half a dozen examples of that kind of where he's just read the room wrong. He's said something offensive accidentally, and then when challenged on it, has just doubled down and continues to fail to read the room and to blame externally. Yeah, he's not good at people, and that just keeps hitting.
And as we start, I don't mean to interrupt you, John, and I apologize, but as we start to outline the story and get into what's happening currently, I think listeners will get a sense of why it's good to have a little bit of background. Now, just to stay in the background in the background time for one more moment. WordPress was built primarily by Matt Mullenweg, but most of the advancement in WordPress over the years has come from the open source movement, from people contributing to the original project and then putting it back into the open ecosystem for others to grab, work on, put their stuff on, make it better. And again, the price for that is contributing it back to the open ecosystem.
Yeah.
But we have commercial entities, people who are or entities, organizations, businesses. Automatic is an example. That's Matt Mullenweg's business entity related to WordPress. or a business like WP Engine,
Yeah.
which set itself up around the open source environment that Matt and millions of others made.
Yep.
So we get to more contemporary times. This is probably July 2024 or early August 2024, and everybody wakes up to a new sudden headache. Matt has clamped down on WP Engine on behalf of Automatic,
Yep.
transferred rights over the years. It seems that Matt has transferred a number of the ownership rights from the foundation, the nonprofit side of WordPress, to the commercial side, to Automatic, and is now clamping down on the licensing and trademark rights around WP or WordPress. I may have a little bit of this off base because the story is quite murky, but
It's messy. Yeah.
John, is that more or less what's been happening the last couple of months?
Just sort of. So let's start at the beginning. So part of the unwritten deal that, well, it is written, it's just weird. Part of the presented deal for being a commercial entity making money off WordPress, so WP Engine, Automatic, any of the big hosting companies, any vendors, etc., is you take part in the Five for the Future program, which this is not mandatory. It's not a legal thing. It's not a normal thing in open source, but it exists in WordPress. And the premise is, if you're making money, take 5% of your resources and give it back. Maybe that's 1 day a week of somebody's time. Maybe it's a cash donation to the foundation, whatever. This is very poorly run. It's very poorly defined. There's very poor definitions around what value means. There are lots of people who give intangible value back. Like I speak at a lot of SEO conferences and I say to people, you should use WordPress and not insert other platform. That doesn't count. If I write and make plugins, that doesn't count. There's lots of rules about what does and doesn't count. It's not very good. Okay, so the closing keynote of WordCamp US, must be months ago now, Matt stands up on stage and essentially subverts the whole event, which is meant to be a kind of collaborative, let's discuss where we're at, let's discuss what we're doing, let's educate, yada, yada. His whole closing keynote is an attack on Silver Lake Client Capital, which owns WP Engine, saying that they are not giving back enough, that they are a multi-billion-dollar revenue company who is not contributing value, and they are a parasite on the ecosystem. And he apparently has been working behind the scenes to try and lever, cajole, threaten, etc., to extract value from them. And it turns out, in hindsight, that there's actually a lot of fairly unpleasant behavior and threatening and not quite blackmailing, but definitely unpleasant conversations with people to try and facilitate that. But the narrative is really mixed. It's a mix of people confuse WP for WordPress in their name, and it's trademark abuse. But then WordPress's biggest existential problem still remains that WordPress.org, the open source software, competes with WordPress.com, which is Automatic's version of it, which is Matt's. So none of that argument holds anyway. Whole bunch of other stuff comes up and gets thrown, but essentially it looks like it boils down to he is not happy because they are making lots and lots and lots of money off WordPress, and on the surface they're not giving back. Now, my stance on this remains that I think they definitely should put some money back in, but they are adding a lot of intangible value to the ecosystem. I think they professionalized the WordPress hosting space in a way that hadn't been done before, which meant a lot of companies who might otherwise have gone with another platform saw the existence of a reliable, professional-looking hosting company that was priced and serviced suitably and went, yes, okay, this is viable, who might not otherwise have. So there's a whole gray area here about, are they adding value? They run a bunch of events, but those events sell hosting for them. They commercialize it themselves. Do those count? A lot of this is just poorly defined.
Oh, it could be argued that WP Engine ate a whole bunch of complaints that WordPress otherwise would have dealt with themselves. I mean,
yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's really weird stuff. Like one of his biggest complaints was like they're evil because they disable post revisions as a feature. And you're like, A, nobody has ever used post revisions because it's like super clunky and awful. And B is like their argument for it was this is a performance hog, which absolutely is. Like WordPress's database infrastructure is not great. It's not modern. And we all cope and there are ways to make it viable, but it is not designed inherently well. And post revisions are a bloat on that. So I'm absolutely fine with them turning off, but this is his big attack piece. So like, how dare they remove the ability of people to do this? They're evil. No, it's all nonsense. Very, very confused. So this escalates, right? And a whole bunch of stuff just starts happening. So in no particular order, Matt's a checkbox appears on the WordPress.org login screen, which you need to log into if you want to log into the Make WordPress Slack, which is where
the Fieldy box, right?
Yeah,
I'm pledging my Fieldy to you.
Yeah, mad. So you need to log in if you want to ask a support question on the forums, or if you're employed by a company who has a plugin or service to answer support questions, or to submit a plugin or a theme, or do any of the things that essentially keep this ecosystem healthy and moving. And the checkbox says something like, I swear to Matt that I do, not quite, but it's saying I declare that I am not affiliated with WP Engine financially or otherwise, which is super vague. Like, I don't know, like it doesn't, there's no terms and conditions. It doesn't say whether it's stored or not. There's questions around GDPR. I don't know if I'm affiliated. I just now recorded a webinar with NitroPack, who were acquired by WP Engine, and my face is on their marketing collateral. Am I therefore associated with WP Engine legally, financially, commercially, or otherwise? I don't know. So I'm not comfortable ticking this box, and 5,000 people are also not comfortable ticking this box, and all rightly so. Slack devolves into questions around it. Matt won't play.
So does
He
that
won't
mean
define it. He won't help.
does that mean you can't participate in the WordPress environment if
Yeah.
and you can't contribute, you can't be on the Slack?
Can't log in.
You're locked out because you don't know if you can legally check this box.
Yes, I don't know if I'm safe to do it. And I know there are big lawsuits flying. I know there's multiple lawsuits flying in both directions about multiple things. So now there's cease and desists in both directions. Matt is demanding money. WP Engine are demanding reversals of various things. There are, like, this is scary. Big corporate lawyers with billion-dollar budgets.
Okay, so when I said that your contribution history was dozens deep, I wasn't kidding. Like I lost count. So what does it do for a guy like you? You've added the environment. You're a constant contributor. Your stuff goes back years. Your most recent contribution was only 4 months ago. Where does that leave you? Are you going to throw into the environment in the future? Do you feel legally safe to participate?
No, I can't. I'm not ticking that box. Like, especially, I know many people who are much less affiliated. So, for example, as a web developer, the local server that I run on my computer is a product that was bought by WP Engine about a year ago. There are many developers who use that. Who are they affiliated? So I'm not comfortable logging. Now I'm very, very lucky that I can do other stuff and that it's not going to affect my livelihood. But there are.
But I'm not lucky about this. This is an environment I rely on as an SEO. This is an environment I rely on as a webmaster, and this is an environment that needs to be secure for all of us on the web. Businesses, webmasters, people looking at cat videos. This is an important environment. And how many people? You're a power contributor, like your contributions are off the hook.
So this gets
how many
worse.
People
this
like
gets
you?
Worse. Loads. And so I'm probably the least significant of that group. Who, like, there's a whole team of employees of Google who work full time on WordPress performance, who off the record aren't comfortable ticking that checkbox. It's not off the record. I think that's fairly obvious. There are long time contributors who built entire sections and components of WordPress who aren't comfortable ticking the checkbox, but it gets much worse. So the Make WordPress Slack turns into a discussion where everybody is saying essentially, Matt, I'm nervous about this checkbox. I don't understand. Can you clarify? What is the legal entity WP? Because WP Engine isn't the company in the lawsuit. It's Silver Lake, the company. And actually, the legal entity is WP Engine LLC, which is different from WP Engine, the host, yada, yada. So the thing is super unclear. So everyone's saying, is this stored? What does it mean? What does affiliated mean? And Matt starts initially deleting everybody's questions and then starts just blocking people out of Slack. So I wake up and me and a whole bunch of other people who have just said, I don't understand this. I'm not comfortable with this. I'm a contributor. I am now not going to log in. Please, can we clarify this? Can we change the wording? Can you tell us what you mean? Can we get some guidance? I can no longer contribute because I cannot log into WordPress.org. My account has been frozen. It's been deactivated. And as has 50 or so people I could name who built entire chunks of work. The person who built the entire REST API, which powers the entire headless WordPress ecosystem. The accessibility meeting last week, I think, which happens every week or so, where they discuss how are we making sure that people who have vision impairment and stuff can use these new features in the block editor. The meetings are cancelled because the two people who used to run them cannot log in anymore because their accounts have been closed because they asked questions. So Matt is just kicking out anybody who dissents.
Okay.
And for
And
anyone
some of the most significant contributors.
interested, let me just jump in real quick. If anyone's interested, these people have gone on Twitter and shown screenshots of their blocking. So this isn't just, I know, so people who know, they can go look this up on Twitter themselves by searching WordPress or WP Engine, because they have stated it, they've shown their blocks and that they're leaving. I just had one question for you before we circle back. WP Engine was invested in by Matt in 2010 to take the server load and the server, off of WordPress, because they were having trouble handling it. Then they came up with their version, WordPress.com, in 2011. Then Matt divested in 2018. Yeah. And then, so between all that time, was there any issue with WP Engine ever mentioned?
Not visibly on the surface. They were a huge sponsor of WordCamp events. They were a huge part of the ecosystem. Matt said in various points when pressured on this that he'd been working behind the scenes and had pressured and cajoled and negotiated and tried, and they hadn't responded, or they said they were going to in good faith and then hadn't acted. I don't know or even really care if any of that's true. I think this all could have been handled behind the scenes with lawyers, and Matt has now gone to war in a way that is hugely harmful. Also interesting that there's other nuances to this. So Matt on his personal website had a blog post, I don't know when it was from, but from many years ago, around that era, about why private equity and investment can be good in open source. And it was essentially telling that story. It was, we have a whole bunch of money which we threw at improving the hosting ecosystem. It talked about Blacklake and WP Engine. That has now been rewritten to remove all mention of them. So he's editing the past now to reinforce this narrative.
Yeah, he also edited, Jim, I don't know if you know, he edited the terms of service around the trademark around the time that this all came out, about end of September.
Because it used to say you could use WP, right? You can't call a thing WordPress, and historically they have been really on that. If you say we are WordPress Banana or we are WordPress Vans, you get slammed down the second your brand goes out the door.
Yeah,
but
like
you can say
Apple used to
WP.
be.
Yeah, absolutely, and Disney and others. But you can say WP, and it's a colloquialism, and it's absolutely fine. Except now it's not. And his argument was essentially WP Engine has become so synonymous with WordPress engine hosting that it's confusing people. And you're like, isn't that a failure of Automatic and you as a competing brand, and of WordPress.org to differentiate itself from .com? Like their success in owning the market awareness can't be their, like that's not their fault. That's really weird. So the whole
at no time did I ever, I don't know about other people out there on the web, but at no time have I ever felt confused between
nobody has
commercial hosting entities, WP Engine and WordPress itself.
There was a quote of something like, "Oh, my mum's confused about this." And you're like,
in fact, I'm more confused. I'm infinitely more confused about WordPress's internal structure itself. And there's two ways to look at this. The charitable way is, let's take Matt at his word. He's working to protect the brand, working to protect WordPress, the foundation, and also There's the less charitable way of looking at it is dude's consolidating everything under the commercial entity and is about to cash in on 15 years of work, seeing what the larger platforms like, say, Shopify have accomplished in much shorter periods of time. How many billionaires were made by WordPress?
Well, he already is. This is the other one of the other parts of the story. He has more money than, like, he's in the top 1% of the 1% of the 1%. Like, there are more zeros in his bank account than any of us will ever see combined, by an order of magnitude. He referred to himself as post-economic the other day, as a kind of argument for why, like, he misread the room again, and somebody was like, "Oh, I'm post-economic." You're like, "Yeah, dude, really."
I barely bought it myself.
And also it's interesting because you said something about this off the being super wealthy part, but when he was doing the interview with Theo was asking him, what do you count as contribution? And someone had just pulled the numbers for WordPress that week, and it was 45 hours or something. WP Engine, I'm sorry, not WordPress. And but someone also said
you confused the two.
Yeah, I totally confused the two. No, it's 5:30 in the morning for me. It's like when they pulled all that, so someone said that Matt had denied their contributions for 2 years. Do you know anything about that? Because they said that they did submit, but they weren't allowed, and also that he did not count anything that they did with scholarships, camps.
there's a
or
bunch of really
contributions in other
weird
ways,
decision. Yeah, there's stuff that
because it doesn't count
doesn't
that.
count. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's
it's an
really
interview.
arbitrary. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's two flavors of that. There's like I don't know, you could go and build a school that teaches WordPress, and it wouldn't count.
yeah.
But then also, yeah, if you contribute to the wrong stuff, he gets a bit twitchy. So a few years ago when I was at Yoast, we were looking, before there was an official performance team, we were looking at, can we re-architect some bits of how WordPress loads, like what files load in what order and how does that work? And we made some really big gains. We shipped out, we've got a whole bunch of stuff ready to ship. We demonstrated the impact. It's like, yeah, but this isn't the thing that I'm prioritizing at the moment. Go work on this instead. And there's loads of examples of people encountering that.
So at Yoast, you had actually helped people defer loading time of, say, images and stuff, so the viewport and all, and because it wasn't a priority of Mullywig's, didn't go through?
Yeah.
Oh,
And then there's a whole bunch of people with similar stories. Yeah, doesn't it just you? So not he definitely has an agenda on what the roadmap. And there is a roadmap, albeit it keeps changing and flexing because it turns out that it takes years and years to build any of this because there's no taking a side step, one of the impacts of this is there are so few contributors left. Like we were already in a position where stuff is slow and difficult because this place is a bit of a ghost town. And part of why is Matt has scared off a lot and frustrated and burnt out a bunch of senior long-standing people who've been there for a decade and are no longer. And the other is partly because of all this dysfunction. There's not a huge amount of recruitment and new blood coming in because contributing in ways that reward and encourage that isn't a thing. So yeah, that's messy.
If you could contribute now, would you feel comfortable, say, setting up a business around WordPress as a platform, knowing that Matt might pull the rug out from you if he feels that way one day?
Well, let me give you the latest chapter because that's the bit that's sort of, I think the answer's no, and I'll tell you why. So the next thing that happened was there's a plugin called ACF, Advanced Custom Fields, which one of my favorites. If you're building an even remotely complex WordPress site that's more than just a vanilla out-the-box thing, ACF is the architecture you use to say, okay, this is a recipe. A recipe has calories and ingredients of thing, yada, yada, to configure the user interface for all of that, store the data to output it in your template. It's really gorgeous, really kind of cool. WP Engine bought that 18 months ago, I want to say, maybe around that period. And have continued to improve it, haven't distorted it in any way. They've maintained the kind of same premium versioning, absolutely fine, no problems. The ecosystem wakes up, about a week or two ago now, and Matt has quote unquote forked ACF. And this is the term, and forking in open source is fine. You take the thing and you go, I'm going to copy this, paste it over here, and then change it and call this one a different name, and this is my own version. And it's different because of ideological reasons or technical reasons or whatever. Absolutely fine, absolutely normal. The problem is he hasn't, legally questionable terminology. The perspective is he hasn't forked it. He has, in fact, just stolen it. So if you go to WordPress.org, the plugins repository, and you search for ACF, ACF no longer exists. What exists is SCF, which is Secure Custom Fields, which is Automatic's product. Now, they launched that in place of ACF. They reused the URL. They kept all of the reviews and all of the history and all of the information. They essentially supplanted it. And the really scary thing about this is, as an end user with a website, if you're a baker or a library or a school or whatever, or NASA or the White House, the next time your plugins update, ACF will now be replaced with SCF.
Oh.
And that raises some really interesting questions because that feels like a supply chain attack. And if I'm an enterprise company deciding on a CMS, I'm sure as hell not going to pick the one where bits of my code can just be switched out. And to be fair, this has always been a thing. In the same way that Chrome extensions might get bought and switched out, if a plugin becomes abandoned or the owner sells it, somebody else might step in, etc. But that's always been fairly small and fairly innocuous. But now you've got a big brand, you've got Automatic and Matt just saying, this is now ours.
Well, and this is part of a legal dispute. I mean, he just went and did it. Yeah.
And so now I think, would I build a business existing in that ecosystem? So much of commercial success in that world relies on the WordPress.org plugin repository. You need people to search for your product keywords. It's an SEO type game. You need people to search for the thing you have, and they find it in the repository, they click install, they get your plugin. If that repository lives on WordPress.org, which Matt is increasingly bullish about, just saying, this is mine and I define the rules, and I will choose who does and does not get to play on what rules. Oh, I would be super nervous, super nervous. And there's some rebuttal. There are some people starting to create, here is a clone, here is a forked open source equivalent of that repository. But in all, and Matt's argument against all of this, by the way, of all the things, every dissenting opinion has just been, oh, you can go fork WordPress. Like, good luck, really genuinely good luck. Except, yeah, you've also got to consider the marketing power. You've got to outmarket Wix. You've got to have contributors. You've got to maintain security. Like, forking it is not a small thing. It's just not feasible. So a lot of these will, maybe we get some traction, but ultimately we're beholden to this marketplace.
So Jono, I have a question. What happens when an open source project like this, who powers the latest estimate, 60% of the web, suddenly loses the main contributors or lose access? It's not even like they're not contributing, right? They're actually blocked from contributing, and they have that knowledge base, and it's not a paid project. Plus, most of the paid staff has left as well. Yeah. What happens next? What happens with this massive CMS, right? Does someone step in and is able to remove that? It doesn't sound like that's possible.
No, so Matt's immutable. So there was a big move in 2015, 2016 maybe, to create a WordPress governance project where we would have a kind of a board of people and decision-making processes, and we would have reviews on things like the roadmap and policies on what kinds of things do we and don't we do, etc. And of course, what happened is this got presented to Matt and said, "Can we have a governance thing, please?" And he essentially said no, so we have no governance. And this happens in all sorts of scenarios. So Matt refuses to delegate. He has 43 direct reports for Automatic. He does not delegate anything. He is omnipresent and omniscient, and every decision is his. So there is no way to remove him. There's no way to dislodge him. There's no way to work around him. Josepha Hayden, who was the head of the WordPress project, was wonderful, but essentially tethered to being just essentially his mouthpiece. And she left. So he paid off a whole bunch of people from Automatic. At the time with the checkbox, anyone who was working at Automatic who disagreed with him ideologically or otherwise could take a payout and walk. And some 12% of the staff, I think, just walked. Yeah. So there's now nobody who disagrees with him there internally either. So even if he did want to try and replace the governance structure or the management structure Automatic, maybe there's nobody who can, and there's nobody who will, and there's nobody who wants to. So what happens now? Maybe a whole bunch of the big hosting companies and big enterprise players in the space who make billions off WordPress get together and agree to create an alternative, a fork in truth. But again, all the same kind of challenges of how do you market against. You've created more confusion in the market because now you have hosting press as well, and like, who the hell understands that relationship? Maybe a whole bunch of them defect to, I don't know, Duda, Wix, something. There's not many good Drupals are better Yeah, like what is the alternative? Because the open source competitors are 10 years behind. The closed source competitors are closed source and also 10 years behind. So Google has 7 or 8 people working full time just on making WordPress sites better, making WordPress core better. Because that improves the. Yeah, they're like, it's fascinating. So whilst you sleep, Google are making your website better so it ranks better in Google. Like, that's cool.
That's in Google's interest. Making WordPress better, more googly is absolutely in Google's interest.
Yeah. That's just a smart play. But there's so many examples. So yeah, I don't know. All these people are essentially twiddling their fingers, waiting for either a significant legal outcome of this case. Maybe WP Engine win one of their cease and desist type things, and Matt is strong-armed into reverting the changes and the blocks he's made. But then that's just the beginning of a war, isn't it? Maybe Matt wins and we enter a new reality where he is just an omniscient god who you try not to attract too much attention of and just exist around him. Super tricky.
Okay.
There's no easy answer. I did see the CEO of Cloudflare giving a little
spoke
about it, but I don't know that he was serious about it. taking it over.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What does this mean in the long run for the greater open source movement? Like the WordPress is the biggest player in the movement
Yeah.
and pretty much dictates, not dictates, but sets the traditions and the values and how people feel about working in the environment. Now the owner, I mean, the internet has always been sort of like a handshake and baling wire agreement. It's only recently that it's
Yeah.
become far more professional.
Yeah.
Open source is that handshake and baling wire agreement. We've agreed to
Yeah.
make this happen because we're all people of good character. And now that character feels very threatened. Does this threaten the entire philosophy of open source?
Yeah, that's my worry. I think WordPress still remains, I vehemently agree, WordPress still remains the best technical answer to how do I put something that looks like a website on the web. And there are so many reasons for that. But yeah, I'm nervous now. I think I already know there are lots of agencies who might have otherwise have been WordPress agencies, but having difficult conversations with their clients and their prospects about what are we going to build this new thing in. And there is the C-suite of those companies are saying, can we trust WordPress? If we're going to build on this, how do we know it will be stable? How do we know that Matt won't do something unhinged to either our hosting or infrastructure, our plugin ecosystem, etc.? None of these bits are now trustworthy. And yeah, that has an impact on the whole open source world because it's the same argument. People are now more aware and more concerned, and they will ask the same questions about Linux or about whatever else. And maybe not to the same extent of disruption, but it does tear a hole in like that we've had a lovely narrative for such a long time that open source is better because we all work together and we're all friends for the greater good and everybody benefits from everybody's work. And isn't this demonstrably better? We move faster, we innovate faster, everybody is better off. And then suddenly, all of that's got just a veneer on top of the fact that actually all we're doing is feeding Matt's ego and his wallet, which yeah, isn't so nice.
So,
Oh,
we were all living in the commons, and then suddenly we discovered we're in the prisoner's dilemma, and just over
Yes,
and over and over again.
yes, that.
So, what does this mean for you yourself? You've been synonymous in many ways with the WordPress environment for so many years. Where are you throwing your energy?
I'm still shouting from the rooftops that WordPress is the best answer. I think even with this mess, yeah, sure, you might get struck by lightning in the same way that Matt might do something that affects your website architecture, etc. Uh, I the alternatives are so bad. Like you go to a different platform, a proprietary thing, and you spend 5 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to build the functionality that WordPress has today just to catch up, never mind to achieve and maintain the same velocity. It's not a good investment. Um, I'm still very much involved. I'm still trying to puppeteer from the outside as much as I can, still have opinions. I'm still talking to all the people, but I can't touch the thing. We even missed a bit of this chapter. Uh, I'm speaking at WordCamp the Netherlands at the end of November.
November.
I'm excellent, and I'm attending WordCamp EU in July. The next one, when I go to get my ticket for that event, I will have to sign into my WordPress.org account, which is now locked. So I will never again be able to get a ticket to or speak at a WordCamp event. So I've also been blocked from the community. I'll attend unofficially and I'll find a way to sneak around through the back door. But this and me and many others, including some Googlers, can't play.
Can you still appear at the November event?
As long as I don't have to log into my account to do anything, which I don't think I have to, yeah, I'll just show up.
So you can
Otherwise,
probably,
they're
I
going to have
mean,
a gap in the agenda.
you're one of those people. You can go to the organizers and and you will be taken around back
Well,
of the
for this one, but
registration
only
booth and
because I'm
brought in.
speaking. But other subsequent ones, I suspect not. They're quite firm. Like they're very well-oiled machines of the WordCamp events. And if I don't have a ticket,
Given many of the people who organized WordCamp have been pushed off the
Yeah.
platform.
So this is the other thing that fails. People, the ability to market. So they're already poorly marketed and poorly resourced, and like that's a long time gripe of mine. But yeah, they're going to fail.
So this is as dire as it feels.
Yeah, because that will also dry up the new contributor pool. Like people who might have become contributors and replaced the people who have gone now have no access, or at least no route to market, as it were.
So what do you think? And seriously, and there may be no answer to this. What do you think his end game is here? What is he going to gain from this? I do know he's promoting all the hosting companies he owns in place of WP Engine.
Yeah.
Other than that, well, I mean, he's set fire to the entire community, to the platform, to how the platform survives, to how it moves forward. It's all been thrown into the fire pit. So
it has, and I struggle to put myself in. I don't know, because the one thing I keep coming back to is there is a critical thing which I think he doesn't understand or chooses not. Like a lot of this feels like delusion. Like he's built his own reality and he's crafted an existence which reinforces it. And one of the things that keeps coming up is an assumption that if contributors leave because they're burnt out or offended or whatever, others will replace them. And he behaves like there's an infinite pool of willing, able, capable people. And I think we are so far down into the bottom of the barrel. There is nobody left, and whoever is like there are plenty of hands who can do tasks, but there aren't disruptive, innovative thinkers who are going to transform. And so what is his end game? What is his goal? I think he wants to be proved right. I think there's a huge amount of ego on the line here, and a lot of his behavior is around that. And two, some degree of consolidation and reaffirming his ownership. And also, despite him being post-economic, moving some money in the directions of his choice. So as you say, like one of the small tactical things that happened was there was a page published on WordPress.org, which was like, if you want to move your hosting away from WP Engine, here's some good alternatives. And like 4 of the 5 of them on there are directly owned by or subsidiaries of Automatic or affiliates. Exactly. So like whichever one you choose, the money's going back to him regardless. And I think in his distorted view of the world, that will prove him right. Like so much of his rebuttals for these kinds of things is, there's lots of people using this, there's lots of money coming out of this, therefore this is good and correct. And I did a couple of interviews with Fast Company a couple of weeks ago, and he reached out to me and said he was hurt by the words I'd used. And I picked my words very carefully, and I'd said, like, I think his actions are damaging the open source environment, they're damaging the perception of WordPress, etc. There wasn't anything in there that I thought was contentious. So even the idea that people see the world differently from him is upsetting and aggravating to him. So I don't know what his endgame is, because I think he is so far beyond being able to relate to the real world. I don't even know what his perception of this whole thing is, because it's clearly not the same thing that everyone else is seeing. Regardless of whether you're on the pro or against WP Engine side, I think he's just in his own world, doing his own thing. I don't know how that relates back to reality.
Yeah, I saw that in the Theo interview, that when he was answering the questions, he appeared very much that way. When Theo was trying to dig at things, he seemed to take little things that weren't slights as slights. So I definitely saw evidence there. Yeah, how dare you? Yeah, as someone who does do uses WP Engine for clients, the great thing about it, like they have a red and blue team, so my client sites don't get hacked. I can just use chat to get things resolved. They don't have to pay extra for it, right? They give you 10 accounts live, and you can have as many as you want not live. And so it's an excellent environment, probably the best one I've used. And so I guess he wants people to move over to his stuff, but I don't see his stuff as being better. So I'm not sure it's going to work out.
And I can definitely tell you several of them are objectively worse by an order of magnitude.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, but I appreciate that answer, because from my side on the outside, I use WP Engine and WordPress, but I'm not like you as a contributor and member of the community, that you don't know what his end game is either. So
reassuring, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm struggling to figure that out myself.
Whatever Matt's reality, the sad reality is this is all of our realities, because this is an environment that, half the web is using, and the other half relies on the security of that previous half. Like the web is literally everything digital connected together somehow. And messing with that environment is challenging. And what I know that I don't Matt himself going to listen to this interview, but somebody associated with him is, and if there could be a message, at least from, I think from us hosts to Matt, is like, seriously consider what you're doing, because there's a much larger foundation at stake. I think our message to you, Jono, is, man, thank you so much for spending time with us today and for being so candid. I know you're going way out on a limb and you're messing with a massive entity, but it's something you all clearly care about and is intimately important to you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm in this ecosystem because I think the integrity of the open web is existentially important for the human condition, right? This resource is not insignificant. And yeah, as you say, if we destabilize the infrastructure for that has unpleasant consequences for all of it. And yeah, WordPress is dysfunctional and flawed in many ways, but it is the best broken thing that we have. So yeah, I want to be moving in a direction that moves it forwards, not moves it backwards, and that's unpleasant. But yeah, thanks for having me. This was fascinating, delightful to rant.
It's wonderful meeting you in this environment. I'm really looking forward to meeting you in live time somewhere,
yes,
sometime in the future. Thank you for joining us at Webcology today, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'll catch you later. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you tired of juggling contacts, manually following up, and deals falling through the cracks? We can fix it so you never lose another lead, enabling 24/7 sales and support via an AI that learns your business. Ready to close more deals with less hassle? Get a free trial of our marketing automation at thebuzzcrm.com.